I want to give great thanks to the team in Ottawa that was going to do local arrangements had we been meeting in person. Their names are in the document. Linda's showing her doc, yeah. Their names are listed in the document, and I don't have them all memorized right now, so I don't want to forget anybody, but there was a lot of effort put into what was going to be a fabulous week of us all gathered in Ottawa. And so just want to highlight that that their work has not been unmissed. And so thank you to those. And I want to give thanks to Terry and Jen and Heather and Tammy and Denise Davis Taylor and Barbara for picking up the challenge of putting this together as a virtual gathering. I don't know about you, but this is the first time I've been the leader or in lead of a 80-person gathering on Zoom. And so I'm hoping that you will be patient. If you have any concerns, you can private message me or you can email me if that feels more comfortable. Oh, and I've got a note from a United Church old hand at Zoom who says, if you, that if it says the private messages, the host will see it in the final transcript, so be kind. Of course, we're going to be kind. And we have a guest joining us from the General Counsel Office. We have Adam Hanley with us today. I believe David Hewitt, who is a diaconal minister as well, but David Hewitt is with us. Amy Crawford is with us. And so they will, some of you may get to meet them as we do breakout groups. I'm going to invite, in just a moment, I'm going to invite Adam Hanley. So Todd, I'm going to invite Adam Hanley to introduce himself and just tell us what his role is with the General Counsel Office. I didn't give Todd a heads up on that. So, and as we move into that moment, I would like everybody to hold in their prayers today as we go forward, that Patricia Baker is having, I think it's knee replacement surgery today, and she very much wanted to participate. No, she had it on Friday. I'm sorry. It was on
I got an update from her husband. She had the surgery on Friday. It was to remove the knee and clean up infection. And there's a spacer in there now, and then she'll get a new knee put in a few months. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Oh, and Amy Crawford wants me to remind everybody that she's a diaconal minister too. Sorry, Amy. And Gail Allen is on from the General Counsel Office. She is leading our theme time tomorrow. Okay, so I've looked at my notes, I've looked at my written notes, and I think I've covered all the housekeeping. And so Adam Hanley, if you're on, I'm going to ask Todd to unmute you and to introduce yourself.
Thanks, Vicki. Hi, friends. My name's Adam Hanley, and I'm an ordained minister who serves at the General Counsel Office in a portfolio called Program Coordinator for Ministry Personnel Vitality. And the work is about supporting policies and programs for the vitality and flourishing of all of our ministry personnel. And a lot of that work is in partnership with your regional council pastoral relations ministers and supporting them in programmatic work. And some of it is with the Office of Vocation and supporting the credentialing committee that oversees interim ministers and educational supervisors and chaplains, and the standards committee that is beginning to outline learning outcomes and other standards for different pieces of training and work for ministry personnel. And I see some familiar faces on this, so it's great to see folks that I've worked with before, and happy to be part of this DUCC gathering online today and later in the week.
Thank you, Adam. All right, and so I'm going to do one more bit of housekeeping, and that's a very quick and a very diaconal way, give you a sense of what the agenda is for today, and then I'm going to welcome us to enter into a time of worship. And so we will begin our gathering today with worship. And I'm looking over here because I have two screens. So we're going to begin with worship. And then after worship, Todd's going to break us into rooms, breakout rooms of 5 people each, so that you can get to know one another and to get connected with one another. And following that, we're going to ask if there's something burning that you need to share with the whole group. We'll ask maybe 1 or 2 groups to, or 2 or 3 groups to share something from their wider group. And actually what I'll do is I'll get you to private message me if there's something that you want to say, and then I can manage the time maybe a little bit. And we're going to conclude today with our memorials that Karen Douglas has put together. And that will happen with a shared screen. So she's going to share her screen, and it will take place that way. There's 2 readers that will participate as well. And then Tammy Allen will wrap us up with some with just some reminders of what time we start tomorrow. And so with that, I will invite Todd to mute me and to let Jen and Terry take over. Thank you.
So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be with you today, to see all of your faces again. It's something I really needed this week, and I'm grateful for all of you to be here. So welcome to our time of worship. My name is Terry Shador, for those of you who don't know me, and I am delighted to be working with Jen Dresser on this project. We've been working since September to get worship ready and had to ditch all of that and start over again. So, and we're also very grateful to Heather Robbins for joining us as our musician today. So as we gather from all across Canada, we are grateful to be together. And in the midst of COVID-19, we bring a lot of concerns and cares and worries. And so I invite you to bring those up now in your hearts and your minds, all the cares and concerns of our whole world, of our own communities, of our families and friends. And let us take a few moments to center ourselves in the Spirit of God. Heather is going to lead us in a piece of music now. All of our mics will be muted, and I encourage you to say the words, sing with gusto, do whatever you need to do during this time. It'll be a time of prayer for us. So I invite Heather now to into music called By Earth and Sky. For our scripture this morning, we'll be using Lecta Divina. We'll read the passage 3 times, asking a different question each time. And so we ask you to have a journal or a pad and paper handy, and just to jot down a few things. In between the readings, we will be sharing our thoughts and ideas using the chat box and the whiteboard. Our scripture this morning comes from Ecclesiastes, and the artwork that's included with that is a 3-stranded rope. And the image emerged out of the final line of our passage. May our hearts and minds be opened as we read the words that shape our faith. I will be doing the first reading. Listen for the words that stand out for you. And there will be a moment of silence following the reading. When the bell rings, it will be time to share those pieces in the chat box. So reading from Ecclesiastes, selected verses 1 to 12. Next, I turned my attention to all the outrageous violence that takes place on this planet. The tears of the victims, no one to comfort them. The iron grip of oppressors, no one to rescue the victims from them. Then I observed all the work and ambition motivated by envy. What a waste, smoke, and spitting into the wind. The fool sits back and takes it easy. His sloth is slow suicide. One handful of peaceful repose is better than 2 fistfuls of worried work. More spitting into the wind. I turned my head and saw yet another wisp of smoke on its way to nothingness. A solitary person, completely alone. No children, no families, no friends, yet working obsessively late into the night, compulsively greedy for more and more. More smoke, a bad business. It's better to have a partner than go it alone. Share the work, share the wealth. And if one falls down, the other helps. But if there's no one to help, tough. By yourself, you're unprotected. With a friend, you can have, With a friend, you can face the worst. Can you round up a third? A 3-stranded rope isn't easily snapped.
Okay, so people have already started typing into the chat box, so I'm going to ask you to continue doing that. And Terry is going to pop those up on the whiteboard for us. So we have wisp, smoke, share, tears, spitting in the wind. Waste. One handful. Share the work. Strength. By yourself, you are unprotected. More than self. Partner, friend. Grip. Solitary. Strength together. Friends can help you face the worst. Will not break. Outrageous violence. Strength in community. Can you find another? Sloth is slow suicide. Laugh. Comfort. Go it alone. Togetherness. Woven together. And share the work. Oh, we've got that one. Okay. And so now we're going to hear the scripture again. And this time, as you listen to this scripture passage, I invite you to think about and contemplate how this passage is speaking to you today. And we'll follow the same process again with silence and then spending some time using the chat room and the whiteboard. So how is this passage speaking to you today? And this is from Ecclesiastes chapter 4. Next, I turned my attention to all the outrageous violence that takes place on this planet. The tears of the victims, no one to comfort them. The iron grip of oppressors, no one to rescue the victims from them. Then I observed all the smoke and ambition motivated by envy. What a waste! Smoke and spitting into the wind. The fool sits back and takes it easy. His sloth is slow suicide. One handful of peaceful repose is better than 2 fistfuls of worried work. More spitting into the wind. I turned my head and saw yet another wisp of smoke on its way to nothingness. A solitary person, completely alone. No children, no family, no friends. Yet working obsessively late into the night, compulsively greedy for more and more. More smoke, a bad business. It's better to have a partner than go it alone. Share the work, share the wealth. If one falls down, the other helps. But if there's no one to help, tough. By yourself, you're unprotected. With a friend, you can face the worst. Can you round up a third? A 3-stranded rope isn't easily snapped. How is this scripture speaking to you today?
Jen, can you share the screen?
Yep. The difference between sloth and peaceful repose. Victims and death. Call together. Peaceful repose rather than worried work. The need for community. Connectedness. To what do I need to turn my attention? May I take peaceful repose rather than worried work? About what am I being greedy? Three-stranded rope. Is my tripod of life. God, family, friends. Without that, death. Why do I work compulsively into the night? I didn't think of myself as greedy. For what am I greedy?
Sorry, Jen, I missed the last one. Why?
Why do I work compulsively into the night? For what am I greedy? Build a team. Sloth is suicide, slow suicide, versus consider the lilies that neither toil nor spin. Which is faithful and under what context?
Consider the lilies which neither.
Toil or spin.
Thank you.
Which is faithful and under what context? So it's part of the same one.
Oh, it's part of the same one.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you. It won't let me back in.
Okay.
Which neither toil nor spin.
Which is faithful.
Pardon?
Which is faithful. Openness to the new in those you encounter each day. The neighborhood, the quiet community.
Okay, read
Friend.
that.
And so there are other things in the chat box, and so you can read some of those in the chat box. We didn't get all the way through because people had lots to say. And we're going to go back and hear our scripture once more.
Is Heather's mic on?
Are you there, Heather?
All right.
There you are.
I wasn't sure if I was doing that or Todd. Anyways. Okay, how are you being called to be part of a three-stranded rope? Reading from Ecclesiastes 4. Next, I turned my attention to all the outrageous violence that takes place on this planet. The tears of the victims, no one to comfort them. The iron grip of oppressors, no one to rescue the victims from them. Then I observed all the work and ambition motivated by envy. What a waste. Smoke and spitting into the wind. The fool sits back and takes it easy. His sloth is slow suicide. One handful of peaceful repose is better than two fistfuls of worried work. More spitting into the wind. I turned my head and saw yet another wisp of smoke on its way to nothingness. A solitary person, completely alone, no children, no family, no friends, yet working obsessively late into the night, compulsively greedy for more and more. More smoke. A bad business. It's better to have a partner than go it alone. Share the work, share the wealth. And if one falls down, the other helps. But if there's no one to help, tough. By yourself, you're unprotected. With a friend, you can face the worst. Can you round up a third? A three-stranded rope isn't easily snapped. How are you being called to be part of a three-stranded rope?
Light can't see inside things. Teaching how to bend and weave together. Inviting others to collaborate in the formidable tasks to transform our world.
Inviting others to
Collaborate in the formidable tasks to transform our world. If I fall down, the other will help. Nurture relationships. As a child of God, I am called. Find the duo who needs a third strand to braid. Find others to share in ministry with. Collaborate, each taking on a piece of work. Braiding with God and others. Looking to see the Spirit. Entwining lay and ordered ministry. Rachel weeps for her children. Those who've come before and those following. Listen for the gifts of others and myself. And again, there are lots of other things in the chat box, and so we invite you to take a few moments at some point this morning and just scroll through and read all of the other things that people have added in addition to what we see on that screen. And Heather's going to lead us again in singing. This is When Pain of the World. And now we're going to move into our breakout rooms. This is for a time of check-in. And I believe we have about 15 minutes. Is that right, Vicki? And so you'll have time with 5 other people just to check in. And if you noticed in your package, there was an invitation to bring a symbol. If you brought your symbol, that would be a time, this would be an opportunity to talk about that as well. So, and we'll just sit tight and wait for those breakout rooms to happen.
And just, this is Vicki speaking. Todd, if you could break us into rooms of 5, you'll have between 15 and 20 minutes. I'll just look at the timing. And I just want to say that I want to lift up that we have somebody joining us from the UK today. It's for this whole week. It's Linda Kitchenton. She was always going to join us in Ottawa, and she's been able to join us by Zoom this time. So she was supposed to be on sabbatical, and I'll let her introduce herself tomorrow morning. All right. So I failed to get her to speak at the beginning of this, but she'll speak tomorrow morning. So Todd, if you could break us into rooms of 5 people each, that would be great. Todd, I don't know if you know who is in each room. There should be a raise your hand element. And so if you're in group 1, and if somebody wants to speak on behalf of the group, and just check in from group 1, and we're just going to go through methodically. And some of you now are probably panicking because you don't know what room you're in. I can only see 25 of you. So group 1, Todd says, I don't know, do you know, Todd, I'm just looking at your message. You just said group 1. Do you know who is in group? Do you know who is in the groups, Todd? You can chat with me. Group 1, Christina Crawford. Oh, you just got outed, Christina. Can somebody from your group check in? I don't know if she can unmute herself. Okay.
Hi. So where's the rest of my group? Can they unmute as well? Or, well, sure. We just checked in and we said where we lived and how we're handling and also enjoying this time of the pandemic and the new and creative ways of worshiping and gathering. We were thankful for the healing of the ozone layer. And if there's anything else that anyone else wants to add, then you guys go ahead.
Well, I think that,
yeah.
Go ahead.
I just mentioned that my symbol was my iPad. It's been a wonderful gift through all of this to be able to keep connected with people, the church service at first, family gatherings, all sorts of ways. So I'm very grateful for that. Yeah.
All right, thank you, group 1. Why don't we just popcorn it if anybody wants to check in, and I'm gonna throw Heather Sandylands under the bus right now and get her, and that'll give everybody else a moment to think. We have 10 more minutes. So Heather was in our group.
Yeah, I was in a group with Vicki and Vicki with a Y Aldersley and Eric and Deb Kygar and myself. Deb, I think you're actually Deborah, aren't you? Deborah Kygar. And we had a really interesting mix of people. We had everything from feeling very isolated and alone to, oh, this has really helped us connect. Everything from what can we do differently to we can't do this, we can't do this. Oh, no, I got to reframe that in positive language. What can we do? What can we do? So I think we had a really nice, really full spectrum of reactions. And some of the things that we found as positives from this time were, first of all, that we can be creative and we can think of ways to do things differently. It is forcing us to look at reframing our lives in positive words instead of always in negative. We talked about how we might be able to change how we interact financially with one another from the multinational and oil and gas based economies to a more cooperative economy, and just to live with one another differently. And even while we're doing all that, to remember and hold on to people who are particularly isolated. Even if they're working at home, they may feel isolated from colleagues, or perhaps their routine is so upside down it causes an implosion. So we wanted to hold those up, even amidst all the, oh wow, this is so cool, we can do new stuff. Anything else you would add? Feel free, folks.
Thank you, Heather. Does anybody else want to check in? I have it in the notes chat section, but if you want to check in with the wider group, we have a few more minutes.
Isn't this just like at Circle when we have to wait for popcorn too and nobody wants to go first or second? And we're just hoping we'll run out of time. So in our small group, we have the mix of retirees and people who are finding a resistance to calming down and slowing down. We found very busy, not so busy. Like, we had that whole mix of stuff too. And how do you find the balance in that? And a recognition that for some ministers, they're just way past exhausted. And part of that might be because we've been trying to do too much and we need to step back, but also an identification that we are doing some things very differently. And how will we take that forward with us? So we had, you know, a real mix in our conversation group.
Thank you, Helen. Would somebody else like to add?
I did want to say that in our group, Diane Trollope told us that this is her 50th anniversary of being commissioned. And so I want to say congratulations to Diane.
Do the round of applause. There's a birthday that's been mentioned in the chat. I'm going to put Linda Kitchenton on the spot and invite her to talk for a moment and just tell us what she does for ministry, because I didn't invite her to do that at the beginning.
Thank you, Vicky.
From the UK.
Thank you. Yes, I'm a deacon in the Methodist Church of Great Britain, and as I said to the group I was with, that means two things. Isn't that we're a ministry, an order of ministry. So I work within the local circuit at 3 churches and on a project, but I'm also in a religious order as well. And you can't be in the religious order unless you're a deacon. And if you're a deacon, you've got to be in the religious order. So it goes together. So quite complicated in some ways. But we met as a religious order last week on Zoom, where just under 200 of us gathered together, which was really good to see everyone. So my ministry here in Hatfield in Hertfordshire, which is about 20 minutes outside of London, is among 3 small churches. My smallest has just 11 members. My largest has about 60. And so I help with the presbyter and coordinate some of the outreach work that we do there. And then I also work on a community project where I live, where we're trying to establish church in this place and seeing what that looks like. So it's a lot of just meeting people. One of the things I do is I do a pop-up cafe on the playground opposite once a month, and all the school children come to it and their parents and the childminders, which is great fun. So I get involved in lots of all sorts of things, food bank, night shelter, work in ecumenici with all my colleagues in the 2 towns where I work. Yeah, and I live with my husband Joe, and we were so looking forward to being in Canada this year. My dad was Canadian, And so we were going to stay with my cousins just outside Ottawa.
Thank you, Linda. Okay, we have time for 2 more people to check in if somebody wants to say anything. I can't see all of you, so I can't see if anybody's raising their hand. So just unmute yourself if you can.
This is Irene. I was in a group with actually 3 of us from Winnipeg, including myself, and Debbie from Calgary and Catherine from Ottawa, who would have been hosting us this week. And one of the things that we talked about that was a challenge in different ways, either for the people in our group or their family members, is how do you honor transition celebratory times in a time like this? We had 2 people whose ministries were winding up through this time, and others of us who have grandchildren who are either graduating from high school or university, and just a little bit of wondering of, you know, how do you move through that transition? So, but it was, for me anyway, really good to be able to share and talk about that. Anybody else from group 12 that wants to mention any of the other things we talked about? Take it.
Okay, so this is where the extrovert in me says, oh, we've been quiet for 10 seconds. So this is, I'm gonna give 15 more seconds for the introverts. I'm sorry. Trying to keep us to a schedule so that we can be mindful of our time.
Can we hear from Marlene about her new position?
Well, if Marlene would like to be saying that, yes.
Why, thank you, Marcy. Hi, everybody. My position is at the General Counsel Office as Program Coordinator for Admission and Pastoral Relations. So admission, I think everybody's kind of familiar with that, where we coordinate that whole program of persons who want to become members of the Order of Ministry of the United Church of Canada from other denominations, whether inside of Canada or outside. The more challenging piece for me during this time was the pastoral relations side, which I was kind of not paying as much attention to when I started in January, because I was trying to get the admissions thing going. So Adam was helping wherever he is with that piece. And then COVID hit. So we were sent home and my whole focus changed because I was asked to look at those pieces that were related to employment and changes that would have been required to be made with employees of the United Church because of COVID-related issues. So it meant I got into a whole lot of labor law and learning lots of stuff around that. And wow, it was great to learn that stuff because every province in Canada has different regulations surrounding, who knew, right? Surrounding everything. So it was a huge learning curve to learn that, but also great to be able to help to craft some of the changes in policy that I know some people were unhappy with, but that's okay. And to see how that unfolded. But thanks be to God, we didn't have to do a lot of layoffs, thank God. But that piece has been interesting. I'll shut up now because I'm one of the extroverts who could talk forever.
Thank you, Marlene. Okay, we're going to transition now from this time of sharing to our memorials time. And how this will go is Karen Douglas will share her screen, and there are two speakers that Todd is aware of at this point, Joan and Ken. And so we'll hear their voices. And then that will take the time that it will take. And when it's finished, then Tammy Allen will conclude the meeting and give some housekeeping for tomorrow. And so this, now I will turn over to Karen, and she's not on my first screen here. So I'm looking for her, but I can't see her. So the floor is yours, Karen.
Okay, are people seeing it?
Yep.
Okay.
I invite you to sit back as we open the family album, remembering and celebrating these 14 women. These women are our family, and their stories are our story. Deaconesses, women workers, missionaries, ministers' wives, diaconal ministers, women of faith and courage. I invite everybody to pray the prayer that is on our screen. Please remember to have your mics muted. God of compassion, we gather in recognition of lives that touched us and shaped the life of our community. With joy, our hearts remember the days that were shared. With respect, our hearts remember the love that was given. Amen. For many years now, we have used Carol Etzler's song, Standing Before Us, as part of our ritual of remembering. And we will do that again this year, but slightly differently, as we sing along with the songwriter from her 1985 recording of the song.
These are the women who throughout the decades have led us and helped us to know where we have come from and where we are going. The women who've helped us to grow. Standing before us, making us strong, lending their wisdom to help us along, sharing a vision, sharing a dream, touching our thoughts, touching our lives like a deep flowing stream.
Ken, we can't hear you.
Sorry, anyway, sorry. The first 5 women we remember today attended the United Church Training School when it was quartered in 2 large homes about 20 minutes walk from Emmanuel College to Toronto. Ruth Pete Robertson had a wonderful childhood with a pastor father who served several small Indigenous communities along the BC coast. Teaching right out of high school in one-room schools, she had proven herself resilient and resourceful when she entered UCTS. Upon her graduation, the Women's Mission Society appointed her as the community worker to Nanaimo and Up Island, BC, to work primarily with Chinese Canadians. There was only a visiting minister to preach once a month. For the next 5 years, she was responsible for the rest: education, visitation, worship services, all across a wide-flung mission field with mostly logging roads to travel on. She loved it. But at a meeting in Toronto, she met Stuart, a candidate for ordination in 1953. Just a month after meeting, they were married. The following year, she and Stu were appointed by the church to serve in Japan. The church felt it could counter the post-war animosity and racism against the Japanese by creating relationships with ordinary Canadians through missionaries. Ruth had 3 children, but she also helped with the congregation. The first year was language study, and both she and Stu became strong speakers. For the rest of their lives, they sometimes spoke Japanese to each other, especially when they didn't want the kids to know what they were saying. Ruth's son said, "My dad got a minister's wife in every sense of the word." Ruth served right along with Stu, including Shaunavon in Southwest Saskatchewan for 21 years. She would say, "I had an amazing life." Her body just wore out, and she died at age 98.
How do you sum up 94 years of the faith-filled life of Jessie McLeod in 2 minutes? Jessie was actually a student at UCTS before Ruth, but her journey had a twist. During her first year, Principal Jean Hutchinson identified the depth of her intelligence and the shape of her potential and guided her into a BA program at Victoria College. 5 years after starting, Jessie graduated with her UCTS diploma and a BA in 1950 and was designated. After a summer at an ecumenical restoration camp in Italy, she went first to Chalmers in Ottawa and then Mount Royal in Montreal to head up Christian education in these large congregations. Mount Royal Sunday School had 987 children and 120 youth in confirmation in 1 year. Between these appointments, she obtained a master's degree from Union Theological Seminary in New York. Jessie was lured away to BC Conference, staffing congregational life and work and the Board of Women. Among the multitude of enjoyments in that work, she identified a highlight in building relationships with the Indigenous women along the coast. In 1975, Jessie broke the glass ceiling at the General Council office as Deputy Secretary at the Division of Mission in Canada. She recalled being the only woman in the room many times. Jessie's approach wasn't strident, but she was strong. She used her skill at empowering people to bend the arc of change. Jessie finished her career in congregational work in Cape Breton before retiring to the community where she was born. An honorary doctorate from Atlantic School of Theology and companion of the Center recognized her contribution. Jessie's advice about diaconal ministry: trust in people. It is how God works.
Marguerite Emminghus lived a long and fruitful life and died in peace in her 97th year. When she was 7, her family arrived in Northern Ontario from Germany. From this moment, her sense of responsibility and her commitment to hard work was evident as she literally interpreted the world to her family. From the age of 16, she went to work to support her sisters and parents, and it took her 13 years to earn enough money to fulfill her dream of UCTS and a vocation as a deaconess. Her graduating class was the largest the school has ever had, Her first appointment with the WMS was to Pier 21 in Halifax, where she welcomed families newly arriving in Canada, something she could relate to. This was followed by 16 years in Christian education at First United in Corner Brook, Newfoundland, George Street in Peterborough, and on the staff of Maritime Conference, and then as Girls Work Secretary in the General Counsel Office.
Keep going, Ken.
Okay, but it is in Marguerite's last position where she is most likely remembered. In 1970, she joined the Center for Christian Studies staff, where she held various positions from assistant to the principal to bursar until retirement 18 years later. Marguerite was very early adopter of reduce, reuse, and recycle. She loved nature and was an award-winning photographer.
The next 4 women we are remembering are links in a chain through the first 4 years in the impressive new building, which Marguerite eventually made her office home. At this point in the life of the church, it might be hard for us to appreciate how much urgency was felt about recruiting women for a surging, seemingly insatiable demand. This era of excitement permeated the training school, and the students were hopeful and proud, and vocations were strongly articulated.
Gloria Kilpatrick remembered well the moment she decided on the training school, watching a 1952 promotional film. At 21, she was too young for overseas work, so offered herself to meet the demand for Christian education workers in Canada. Nearing her graduation in 1955, 2 things happened. One was the offer's position as CE Director and Secretary at St. Paul's in Fredericton, a not unusual combo as congregations really needed both positions, but didn't have sufficient funds. The other was that she met Howie, the brother of one of her classmates, Mary Ellen Nettle. Designated by Maritime Conference, she took up her work, which she loved, especially the youth work, which she was very good at and appreciated for. But her long-distance relationship resulted in a proposal. Hearing of her planned return to Toronto, Mrs. Campton, the head of the Deaconess Order, after informing Gloria that she was disjoined because of marriage, offered her the job as office secretary for the order. Gloria was grateful to be connected with deaconesses and their comings and goings. It was only later in life that she saw the unfairness that she had to give up her status. When her children were older, she became the church secretary at Bedford United in Nova Scotia. At her retirement in 1996, these words were in the annual report. Gloria has been much more than a church secretary for the last 15 years. She has been one of our finest ministers. Music, especially her women's choirs, church activities, family, and the beauty of the Northumberland Strait gave her joy. She died in her 87th year.
These are the women who joined in the struggle, angry and gentle and wise. These are the women who called us to action, who called us to open our eyes. Standing before us, making us strong, lending their wisdom to help us along, sharing a vision, sharing a dream, touching our thoughts, touching our lives like a deep flowing stream.
Gloria was one of the big sisters there to meet Frances Clark when she arrived at UCTS in the fall of 1954. Frances was a child of the manse, with an ordained brother and her sister Florence, a missionary. Church work was in her genes. Frances' first career was as a teacher, a time she described as a disaster. The highlight of those years was summers leading Camp Quidmolac. She loved the creativity of teaching in a way that people wanted to learn. She realized that she could do that full-time in church work, and as she said, it turned me on. After designation, she began an 11-year run as Director of Christian Education, first at Cobourg United in Brantford, and then at Nelson United in Burlington. Fran brought her tremendous creativity to this work, but after more than a decade, she was looking for something different. She stepped aside from the church and for 3 years operated a tailoring business in Hamilton. She variously referred to that period of time as her sojourn in the wilderness, but also grateful for the perspective of church from the pew side. Eventually, God called her back to congregational ministry, and in Sarnia, she worked with Reverend Dr. Maurice Boyd, who encouraged her to seek ordination. After study, she was ordained and called to Metropolitan in London, where she worked once again as the assistant minister with Maurice. When he left in 1989 over the church's decision to include gays and lesbians, she ably led the congregation through a difficult time. Frances was a gentle but strong woman, the kind of person who could hold her own for all those years working under a powerful senior minister. Fran didn't see ordination replacing her diaconal call. She stayed connected with CCS and the diaconal community and influenced people into the diaconate. She died in her 90th year, confident in God's abiding love.
Just as Fran had been welcomed to the school, she welcomed Thelma Clear. Thelma was in the first group of students to start their year in the new building. Graduation and designation as a deaconess was followed by an appointment under the WMS to Northern Rhodesia, now Zambia. As an evangelistic missionary in the Copperbelt region, she worked under the direction of the local African minister, primarily responsible for Christian education with women and children. Zambia, she noted, was a land of contrast between the white European culture and the standard of living, and the lifestyle the indigenous Black population had. She and her colleagues in Zambia were putting all their effort into local leadership development as they could see independence was coming. If it wasn't for meeting John Clear, Thelma would have stayed to support the people she was serving. They were married in Africa, and in an unexplainable quirk of history, she was not disjoined from the order. She followed John's academic career, and when in Toronto, she serves as the deaconess at Humbercrest, where she influenced a young Diane Trollope into diaconal ministry. Moving to the United States, she relinquished her status. After John's death, she moved to England, finding administrative work in a Methodist training school. She died at the age of 92.
It was Thelma's turn to be the big sister as Joan Stedman entered the school at age 30 with a first career in teaching, complemented by volunteer work in both music and church youth work. Joan accepted an appointment to Southminster in Ottawa as their first full-time deaconess. The congregation was concerned that the Sunday school enrollment had fallen to 228 and wanted to strengthen their CE program. But Joan's eye was on more than the Sunday school, and she was soon engaged to Alvin Harding. She was disjoined by the committee on the deaconess order when they learned of her upcoming wedding. However, the Southminster board voted for her to continue on the staff and appealed to the committee for an exception to the rule, which was granted. The committee approved and her membership in the deaconess order was reinstated. She continued briefly until her position with Southminster ended when Alvin took a position in Owen Sound and they left Ottawa. Joan raised a family, working tirelessly as a church volunteer, gave leadership to the UCW, and was active in the local music scene. She died at the age of 92.
Bessie Lane graduated from Covenant College in 1960, but she started at the school in 1952 when she was recruited as the school secretary. Principal Harriet Christie planted the seed of possibility for ministry once observing Bessie's potential. After earning a BA as a mature student, she returned to the school as a student. Designated in 1960, she became director of CE at Canadian Memorial in Vancouver, a 5-year stint followed by a year of travel and study literally around the world. Back she headed to Covenant College, but now her role on staff was field education director and teaching Christian education. Because of Bessie's long connection with the school, she had a significant impact on shaping the diaconal practice of ministry. The next call involved training in pastoral care, and during an intensive period of reflection, she decided to seek ordination to add to her diaconal call. Chaplaincy and congregational leadership in team and solo ministries in Lindsay, Sudbury, and Whitby followed. She retired the paycheck, she said, but not the ministry. In 1996, Laurentian awarded her an honorary doctorate. A decade later, she was celebrated as a companion of the center. Bessie was an inspiration to many, an ever-ready bunny with diverse and broad skills and a deep commitment to faith. She died in her 95th year.
These are the women who nurtured our spirits, the ones on whom we could depend. These are the women who gave us their courage, our mentors, our sisters, our friends, standing before us, making us strong, lending their wisdom to help us along, sharing a vision, sharing a dream, touching our thoughts, touching our lives like a deep flowing stream.
Joan McLean was a classmate of Bessie's at UCTS. She grew up in a church home in suburban Toronto and felt a call to be a deaconess. With her designation, she accepted an appointment to Chinese United Church in Vancouver. Joan joined Deaconess Pauline Top, who became a lifetime friend, in offering Christian education and outreach services to the congregation. CGIT, Young People's Union, Mission Band. The WMS had a long view about their work and invested in the development of their staff, and they decided to send Joan to Hong Kong so that she could learn Cantonese. Language training was more than school. Joan was connected with the mission work underway, which included educational work, running schools for poor children excluded from the government system, medical work in the refugee camp, and theological education through a seminary. Unfortunately, Joan experienced health issues related to asthma and had to return home after 18 months. In recovery, Joan reconnected with Henry Lum, who had been in the young people's group at Chinese United. After they married, Joan left the order voluntarily, raised their 3 children, helped in the electronics business they owned, and was a very active church volunteer. She enjoyed surprising Chinese shop owners when she ordered in Cantonese. She died at 87.
In 1959, Dorothy Ovens heard UCTS principal Harriet Christie speak about the urgent need for church workers, and an old flame was rekindled. She left behind a 15-year teaching career for church work. Dorothy thrived in the academic environment. She valued her summer field at Stella Mission in Winnipeg for new connections with Indigenous people, including an opportunity to travel to several communities in the North. After graduation from the newly named Covenant College and designation as a deaconess, she served St. Paul's in Dundas and later St. Luke's Islington as Director of Christian Education in these busy Ontario congregations. Impressed with her abilities, St. Luke's decided to change their policy and keep the church open all summer and asked Dorothy to lead the services and preach. Dorothy's close teammate was leaving St. Luke's, and she had plans to marry Harv Lendels later that fall. It seemed like a time for a change, and she gave up her deaconess status in 1968 to devote herself to volunteer work and family. She lived a full and rich life and died at 94.
Dorothy Landels and Yvonne Wilkie, both from southwestern Ontario, were classmates in the new Covenant College. Yvonne struggled with the decision to be designated, not because she didn't feel the calling, but because she was engaged to Jim, a student with 1 more year at Emmanuel. The church was in the midst of debate about married deaconesses, and mentors advised her that it might be easier to be reinstated later, even if she was disjoined now. So she proceeded and was appointed to Humber Crest in Toronto. A month before her marriage, Tina Campion wrote and told her she would be disjoined, not for marriage, but because she was leaving her church position. Yvonne refused to return her deaconess pin. The settlement committee in Manitoba Conference made no secret of the fact that they were settling Jim to a pastoral charge with a high priority on Christian education. Jim had no particular skills in that department, but they knew Yvonne did. Yvonne was never reinstated, but gave a life of volunteer service as a minister's wife and church volunteer. She was widowed in 1996 and remarried. Yvonne's health was not good when COVID-19 swept through the seniors' home where she and her husband lived. She died at age 87, just a few weeks ago. At this time, it appears that Jim will recover.
Barbara Kopp taught for a decade in her home of New Brunswick, earning a BA and a B in education before enrolling in Covenant College in 1961. That year, the joint program with Emmanuel was revamped, and Covenant students with degrees were taking a lot of their program there. It was thought that the Covenant didn't need its own student paper, as Covenant student news could be in the Emmanuel paper. Barbara, as the Covenant student president, reported at a meeting that Emmanuel students agreed, and they were told her that they thought the girls could help by typing. Barbara was made a deaconess by Maritime Conference and took a position through the Board of World Mission to teach Iwa at Women's University in Korea. When she returned, she earned an MA in theology in New York and began a 20-year career with the WCA, first as program director, then executive director in several cities. In March 1988, what was she thinking? Barb became the General Counsel Secretary for Management and Personnel, and then took a share in dealing with the fallout from the Victoria decision. After retirement in 1994, she was active in Chinetco Presbytery and served the congregation in McGee's Mills for a number of years. She died peacefully, just shy of her 84th birthday.
Sharon Davis arrived from Saskatchewan in 1968, just as the union of the Anglican Women's Training College and Covenant College was underway. The new school had no name until the fall of 1970, so hers was the only graduating class from the Anglican United College. Sharon was one of 3 Saskatchewan grads designated that year. From the Leader Post article, one thing they pointed out is that being a deaconess does not restrict their personal freedom. This is telling of the attitudes of the times, and it's not surprising that Sharon would be assertive about her rights. She had both sensitive pastoral skills and an ability to say what was needed when it needed to be said. Her work included chaplain at the women's prison in Kingston and conference staff in Saskatchewan. Her congregational work was always in a team. In one larger parish, she served the Indigenous communities of what was then known as File Hills Reserve. She fostered many strong church leaders and was proud that St. James in Regina became affirming in 1998 during her tenure. She shared her exceptional music talent widely and played for many church conferences and events. Sharon had some chronic health concerns, including arthritis, and with decreasing mobility, she went on disability in 2004. She and her partner, Jackie, moved to Calgary, where she died at age 71.
When Pauline started taking courses at the Center for Christian Studies in the late 1970s, changes begun a decade before were well evident, and her interest in feminism and social change were a good match. Pauline had raised her 4 daughters and wanted to put a shape to the church work she had done for decades as a volunteer. Encouraged by her minister to see her gifts for community development, she decided on diaconal ministry. Pauline was a part-time student and completed the program in 1983. She served 2 congregations as the diaconal minister, Newton Brook and Bloor Street, where she was able to work with Indigenous people in the community. She also dedicated herself to making the church a welcoming place for gay and lesbian people at a particularly important time in the church's history. After her retirement in 1991, she kept active in church and community. She died in March after a long illness in her 85th year. The family hasn't been able to have a funeral yet because of COVID-19.
These are a few of the women who led us. We know there have been many more. We name but a few, yet we honor them all. Those women who went on before, standing before us, making us strong.
I invite you to join me in prayer, where the lines are in bold. God of our hope, we hold these lives with gentle hands, feeling their joy, grieving their loss. These stories are the stories which create the meaning of our community. And we remember others in our community who are grieving. For those who have lost loved ones as victims of violence. For those who can't see or hold their loved ones because of isolation. For those experiencing job loss and the fear of uncertainty. With full hearts, we share these stories, trusting this keeping of memory brings the fullness of God alive. Amen.
Thank you so much, Karen, for that lovely tribute. I'll invite Tammy now to close our meeting.
I too echo my thanks. We are indeed surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses, a great cloud of saints that have gone before us. I also want to thank Jen and Heather and Terry for their worship leadership, and Ken and Joan for their part in the memorial that we just experienced. And I want to thank all of you for participating today. This was very good. You know, you always wonder, how will it work? We you know, this different format, and it was good to be surrounded by all of you today. Just some reminders before we go into tomorrow. There are, in your package on page 3, there is a new sign-in. It's a different one from today, so don't just run back to the one you used today. Go to page 3 of the package and you'll find the sign-in. Vicky will also be sending out an updated package with Prairie to Pines report and a link to Showcase Ottawa that John has put together. So just remember those, and also check out from the package the material that Gail Allen suggested that you take a look at before her presentation tomorrow. I'm looking forward to that. Just checking my list of things. Also, when you sign on tomorrow, if you could try and sign on a bit before the hour so that we're all ready to go and start right at 10 o'clock. And reminder, the time is the same as it was today, 9 Pacific, 10 Mountain, 11 Central, 12 Eastern, 1 o'clock Atlantic, and if anybody's in Newfoundland, 1:30. I think that's all I have to say, except to just wish you a blessing for the rest of this day. May we go from here to find moments of rest, moments of peace, and moments of joy until we meet one another again tomorrow. And to quote my friend Lee Spice, who is our Chinookwiin's Regional Pastoral Care Minister, tomorrow, same bat channel, same bat time. Take care, all. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye all. Bye, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.